Jungkook's voice was barely audible over the relentless downpour. His hands trembled, not from the cold, but from a sheer disbelief of what he was witnessing. Under the dim glow of the streetlight, a frail old man with matted hair and a face marked by time and hardship sat hunched against a brick wall. His tattered coat was soaked through, clinging to his emaciated frame. In front of him, a plastic bowl filled with loose change rattled as raindrops splashed into it. Slowly, the man lifted his head. His hollow, weary eyes met Jungkook's. Jungkook. The voice was raspy, uncertain, like he wasn't sure if he was seeing reality or a ghost from his past. Jungkook felt like he was being yanked into a time warp. 5 years ago, this man had stood tall on a stage, his voice commanding, his gaze sharp with passion. This was the man who had taught him how to embody every role, how to find truth within the lies that acting demanded. But now, that man was just a shadow of who he once was, that a past that won't stay buried. The rain poured harder. People passed by without a second glance, too absorbed in their own worlds to care about the homeless man shivering on the pavement. Jungkook knelt down. Choi's voice was barely above a whisper, but the weight of his words hit Jungkook like a punch to the gut. Kneeling in the rain, Jungkook could see up close just how much time had ravaged his former teacher. His once commanding presence had crumbled into something fragile, almost unrecognizable. But those eyes, those same piercing eyes that had once held unwavering conviction, were now clouded with exhaustion and something far worse, shame. Jungkook clenched his jaw. "What happened to you?" Mr. Choi let out a dry, bitter chuckle. "Life happened." A face he can't ignore. Jungkook looked around, expecting someone, anyone, to recognize the man who had once shaped young actors into stars. But no one stopped. No one cared. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a thick fold of cash. "Come with me. Let me help you." Mr. Choi stiffened, his eyes darkening. "I don't need your money." Jungkook exhaled sharply, frustration creeping into his voice. "Then what do you need? Because I can't just walk away and pretend I didn't see you like this." The older man stared at him for a long moment before shaking his head. "Some things can't be fixed, Jungkook." Jungkook felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. The ghost of a scandal. The last time he had seen Mr. Choi was 5 years ago, right before the man had disappeared from the industry overnight. No goodbyes, no explanations, just whispers of scandal, accusations that never reached the public. Jungkook had been too focused on his own rising career to question it. Until now. "Tell me what happened," he pressed, his voice quieter now. Mr. Choi's fingers tightened around his soaked coat. His entire body looked like it wanted to fold in on itself. "You don't want to know." But Jungkook did, and he had a feeling that once he found out, there would be no going back. Mr. Choi's voice was barely audible over the pounding rain, but the way he said it, low, almost pleading, made Jungkook's stomach twist. The older man wasn't just refusing help. He was hiding something. Jungkook tightened his fists. "Then tell me. Let me decide for myself." Mr. Choi let out a bitter laugh. "You always were stubborn." He coughed, his body shuddering from the cold. "Fine. But not here." Jungkook hesitated. Was he really about to bring a homeless man, his former teacher, into his home? The thought alone would set the tabloids on fire if anyone found out, but none of that mattered. Without another word, Jungkook helped Mr. Choi to his feet. A dangerous memory. Jungkook's apartment was warm, too warm after being out in the freezing rain. He handed Mr. Choi a towel and a fresh hoodie, watching as the man hesitated before accepting. "You still drink coffee?" Jungkook asked, trying to ease the tension. Mr. Choi smirked, the first hint of his old self peeking through. "As long as it's black." Minutes later, they sat across from each other in the dim kitchen, steam rising from their cups. The silence stretched between them like a knife's edge. Then Mr. Choi spoke. "They took everything from me, Jungkook." His grip tightened around the mug. "Because I knew something I wasn't supposed to." Jungkook's breath hitched. "Who?" The older man exhaled shakily. "Powerful people. The kind who don't forgive. The kind who erase you if you get in their way." Jungkook felt his pulse quicken. "What did you know?" Mr. Choi's eyes met his, haunted, resigned. A truth so ugly, it would destroy everything. Jungkook's grip on his coffee mug tightened. The air in the room had shifted. He could feel it pressing down on his chest, thick with something unspoken and dangerous. Across the table, Mr. Choi sat motionless, his fingers trembling slightly as they rested against the ceramic cup. His eyes, once sharp and full of fire, now held nothing but exhaustion. Jungkook swallowed hard. I don't care about that. I need to know. Mr. Choi let out a slow breath. You don't understand what you're asking for. But Jungkook did. And yet he couldn't shake the growing sense of dread curling in his stomach at a name that shouldn't be spoken, Mr. Choi looked past Jungkook, as if expecting someone to be listening. His voice dropped to a whisper. Have you ever heard of the Black Curtain? Jungkook frowned. The entertainment company? It was one of the most powerful production houses in Korea, responsible for launching some of the biggest careers in the industry. Rumors swirled about their questionable tactics, exploiting young talent, silencing anyone who crossed them, but no real proof had ever surfaced at MR. Choi gave a humorless chuckle. That's what they want you to believe. But behind that name lies something far worse. Jungkook leaned forward, his pulse racing. What did you see? Mr. Choi's jaw tightened. His entire body tensed like a man on the verge of breaking. I saw them destroy someone, he whispered, and when I tried to expose them, they made me disappear instead. The beginning of the end. Jungkook felt a chill crawl down his spine. This wasn't just about a ruined career. This was something deeper, darker. He thought back to the countless actors who had vanished from the industry overnight. Careers cut short, scandals appearing out of nowhere. People who were never heard from again. And now, sitting in front of him, was a man who might have been one of them. Jungkook took a shaky breath. Who did they destroy? Mr. Choi hesitated for the longest time. Then, finally he spoke. Her name was Yoon Ha-rin. The name hit Jungkook like a thunderclap that he knew it. Everyone did. Yoon Ha-rin had been a rising star, brilliant, beautiful, untouchable. Until one day, she was gone, dead. Suicide, they had said. But as Jungkook stared into Mr. Choi's haunted eyes, he realized that was a lie. That Jungkook's voice barely made it past his lips. The moment the words left his mouth, the air between them seemed to grow heavier, thick with something suffocating to MR. Choi didn't answer immediately. He just stared down at his trembling hands, the silence stretching long enough to make Jungkook's heart pound. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, No, she didn't. Jungkook felt his stomach drop. The entire nation had mourned Yoon Ha-rin's sudden suicide 5 years ago. The brilliant young actress, just 23 at the time, had been found in her apartment, pills scattered across the floor, a cryptic note left behind. The media had spun it into a tragic tale of loneliness, pressure, and the dark side of fame. But now, sitting across from him, was a man who had just shattered that illusion. That Jungkook's hands curled into fists. Then what really happened to her? A night that changed everything, Mr. Choi let out a long, shuddering breath. The night before she was found, she came to me. She was terrified. Jungkook said she had uncovered something she wasn't supposed to. Something about the Black Curtain. Jungkook's pulse quickened. Did she tell you what it was? A slow shake of the head. She wanted to, but she was afraid. She just kept saying, They're watching me. They know. I tried to get her to stay with me that night, but she insisted on going home. Said she needed to gather proof. Mr. Choi's voice broke. The next morning, she was dead. Jungkook exhaled sharply, his mind racing. And you think they silenced her? Mr. Choi's expression was grim. I don't think, Jungkook. I know. Jungkook felt a chill run down his spine. If this was true, if Ha-rin had been murdered, then someone had covered it up. Someone powerful enough to manipulate the police, the media, the entire industry. And Mr. Choi had tried to expose them. Jungkook swallowed hard. That's why they destroyed you, isn't it? Because you knew too much. Mr. Choi let out a bitter laugh. I was stupid enough to think justice existed in this world. I tried to go to the police, the press. But before I could, my life was ripped apart. My career, my reputation, everything. They made sure I was erased. Jungkook clenched his jaw. But you survived. Only because I disappeared first. A choice that can't be undone. Silence settled between them. Outside, the rain had stopped, but inside Jungkook's head, a storm was brewing. He had two choices that he could walk away. Pretend he never found Mr. Choi. Pretend Yoon Harin's death had been exactly what the world believed it was. Or he could dig deeper, uncover the truth, and risk becoming the next person to disappear. Jungkook exhaled slowly. His decision was already made. Looking straight into Mr. Choi's tired, wary eyes, he said, "Tell me everything." Mr. Choi's warning hung in the air, but Jungkook didn't flinch. He had already made up his mind. For years, he had lived in a carefully curated world, a world of bright lights, roaring crowds, and endless success. But now, that world felt paper-thin, a fragile illusion hiding something much darker underneath. Jungkook leaned forward. "I don't care. I need to know what really happened to Harin." A bitter smile ghosted across Mr. Choi's lips. "Then let me ask you this. Jungkook, how much are you willing to lose?" Jungkook hesitated. He wasn't naive. If the black curtain was as powerful as Mr. Choi claimed, then knowing the truth wouldn't be enough. They would do anything to keep it buried. And if they had destroyed Mr. Choi's life, they could destroy his too. A clue from the past. Mr. Choi reached into his worn-out coat and pulled out a small, water-stained notebook. He placed it on the table between them. "This is all I have left." Jungkook picked it up, flipping through the fragile pages. Inside were notes, scribbled frantically in fading ink, dates, locations, fragments of conversations. And then, a name. Ji Sung-min. Jungkook frowned. "Who is this?" Mr. Choi exhaled slowly. "The last person Harin spoke to before she died." A chill ran down Jungkook's spine. If Harin had confided in someone that night, then maybe, just maybe, the truth hadn't died with her. "Where is he now?" Mr. Choi shook his head. "I don't know. After Harin's death, he vanished." Jungkook swallowed hard. If Sung-min had disappeared, there were only two possibilities. Either he was in hiding, or he was dead. A warning too late. Jungkook's mind raced. He needed to find Ji Sung-min. If there was even the slightest chance that Harin had told him something important, he couldn't let it slip away. But before he could say another word, Mr. Choi suddenly stiffened. His expression shifted from exhaustion to something more urgent. Feared, he turned his head toward the window, his face paling. "Jungkook," he whispered, "did you tell anyone I was here?" Jungkook's heart skipped a beat. "No, why?" A shadow moved outside. Then, a sharp knock at the door. Jungkook froze. Mr. Choi's hand shot out, gripping Jungkook's wrist with surprising strength. His voice was barely audible. "They found me." The knocks turned into pounding. Someone was outside. Jungkook's pulse hammered in his ears. His apartment was on the 15th floor. No one came up here without security clearance. Whoever was knocking, they weren't supposed to be here. Mr. Choi's grip on his wrist was tight, his fingers ice cold. His voice barely made it past his lips. "Don't open it." Jungkook swallowed, his throat dry. "Who is it?" he called, trying to keep his voice steady. Silence. Then a voice. Low. Measured. "Mr. John, we need to speak with you." Jungkook's stomach twisted. The way they said his name, too calm, too polite, set every alarm in his head blaring. Mr. Choi was already moving, his body tense with panic. He grabbed the small notebook from the table and shoved it into Jungkook's hands. "Hide this. Now." Jungkook didn't question it. He darted to the kitchen, slipping the notebook into the narrow space between the refrigerator and the wall. His hands trembled as he stepped back into the dimly lit living room. The pounding came again. "Mr. John, we know you're in there." Jungkook turned to Mr. Choi. "What do we do?" The older man exhaled shakily. "If they get in here, neither of us will leave this apartment alive." A shadow from the past. Jungkook's mind raced. He had to think fast. His eyes flicked to his phone on the counter. If he could call security, too late. The sound of metal scraping against the lock sent ice down his spine. They were picking it. Mr. Choi backed away from the door, his face ghost white. "Jungkook, listen to me. If something happens, click." The door swung open. Two men stepped inside. Dressed in sleek black suits, they moved with the quiet confidence of people who didn't fear consequences. One of them, a tall man with sharp features, closed the door behind him. That Jungkook's fists clenched. Who are you? The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. We only want to talk. Mr. Choi let out a shaky breath. Liar. The man ignored him, his gaze locked onto Jungkook. You've been asking questions about Yoon Harin. Jungkook felt a cold dread creep into his bones. The man took a slow step forward. That's a mistake. The first warning, Jungkook's jaw tightened. Why? Because I might find out the truth. The man let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head. No, Jungkook. Because people who dig too deep end up buried. His words sent a shiver through Jungkook. He wasn't making a threat. He was making a promise that Mr. Choi suddenly grabbed Jungkook's arm, his grip urgent. Don't listen to them. His voice cracked. Don't let them silence you like they did her. The man's expression didn't change, but the air in the room grew heavier. The second man, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. That's enough. Then, without warning, it gunned out a flash of silver. Jungkook barely had time to react before, bang, a gunshot tore through the room. The gunshot ripped through the air that Jungkook's ears rang. His breath caught in his throat as he watched. Mr. Choi staggered backward. The dark stains spread across his chest. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The two men in suits stood still, their faces unreadable. Mr. Choi swayed on his feet, his mouth opening like he wanted to say something. Then his legs gave out. He collapsed. Jungkook moved before he could think, catching his former teacher before his body hit the floor. Mr. Choi. Jungkook's voice cracked. Blood soaked through the fabric of the hoodie Jungkook had lent him, warm and sticky against his hands. The older man struggled to breathe, his fingers gripping Jungkook's arm weakly. His lips trembled, trying to form words. Jungkook leaned in. Stay with me. Please, a whisper. So faint he almost didn't hear it. Or run. Jungkook's blood turned to ice. Run. Then, a sharp click that Jungkook's head snapped up. The man with the gun was pointing it at him now that a choice between life and death. Jungkook's heartbeat pounded in his skull. He could barely think past the panic screaming in his veins. The man sighed, tilting his head slightly. That was unnecessary. His voice was eerily calm, like he had just swatted a fly instead of shooting someone in cold blood. The second man crouched beside Mr. Choi's body, checking his pulse. His expression remained neutral. He won't last much longer. Jungkook's stomach lurched. You. His voice shook with rage. You killed him. The man holding the gun gave him a small, almost apologetic smile. Correction. He was already dead the moment he started talking. Jungkook's breath came fast and shallow. His mind screamed at him to do something. But what? Then the gunman took another step forward. You have two choices, Jungkook. Jungkook tensed. 1. You forget everything. You never mention Yoon Harin again. You never ask another question. The man's voice dropped lower. Or 2. He raised the gun. You die here, just like your dear teacher. The only way out. Jungkook's pulse thundered in his ears. His entire body screamed at him to fight, to do something. But one look at Mr. Choi's unmoving body told him the truth. He wasn't ready for this fight. Not yet. The second man pulled out a clean white cloth and started wiping the gun, erasing fingerprints. As if this was just another job. Decide quickly, the gunman said that Jungkook's hands clenched into fists. His teeth gritted so hard they hurt. He wanted to scream, to punch, to fight. But if he died here, there would be no one left to uncover the truth. Slowly, he forced himself to speak through clenched teeth. I'll forget. The gunman studied him, his dark eyes searching for any sign of a lie. Then he smiled. Good boy. Jungkook wanted to rip that smile off his face. The man lowered the gun. Remember, Jungkook, some stories aren't meant to be told. He turned to leave. The second man followed. Just like that, it was over. Or so they thought. Jungkook knelt beside Mr. Choi's body, his chest tightening. His teacher's face was frozen in pain, his eyes half-lidded, staring at nothing. Jungkook whispered shakily, I won't let them win. His fists tightened. They thought they silenced him. They thought he would be too scared to keep going. They were wrong. The gunman's words echoed in Jungkook's mind long after the door clicked shut behind them. He was alone. Alone with a dead man. Jungkook swallowed the bile rising in his throat. His fingers curled into his palms, nails digging into his skin. His whole body shook, not just from fear, but from the rage bubbling up inside him. They thought they had won. They thought they had silenced him. They were wrong. Erasing the evidence, Jungkook forced himself to move that he grabbed a towel, pressing it against Mr. Choi's chest even though he knew. It was pointless. Blood had already seeped into the floor, staining the wood beneath him. His teacher was gone. Jungkook shut his eyes tight, breathing through the grief that threatened to consume him. Not now, that he had to be smart. First, he wiped the surfaces, door handles, the kitchen counter, anything Mr. Choi might have touched. He wasn't sure if the black curtain would bother covering their tracks, but he wouldn't take the risk. Then he moved to the small gap behind his refrigerator. The notebook, Jungkook's fingers found the worn cover, pulling it out carefully. He flipped through the pages, his heart pounding. Names, places, conversations written in frantic, messy handwriting, the very back. Ji Sung-min's address. Jungkook's pulse quickened. This is if Sung-min was still alive. He was the last person who could tell him the truth about Yoon Ha-rin. He grabbed his jacket and slipped the notebook into his pocket. One last glance at Mr. Choi, and then he walked out the door. Not as a victim, as a hunter, that a city that watches soul was suffocating at night. Neon lights flickered against wet pavement, their glow reflecting off the endless sea of glass and steel. Jungkook kept his head down, hood pulled low, hands shoved in his pockets. His mind was racing. Were they watching him? Mr. Choi had warned him. The black curtain sees everything. Jungkook slipped into a convenience store, his fingers hovering over the snack aisle, as if deciding what to buy. In reality, his eyes flicked toward the small security mirror near the ceiling at a black sedan sat parked across the street. Jungkook's jaw clenched. They were watching. He grabbed a random energy drink and paid in cash, walking out as if nothing was wrong. He took a sharp turn into an alley, moving fast. If they were following him, his feet pounded against the pavement. One turn, then another. He cut through back streets, weaving through crowds. Then, finally, he stopped, waited at silence, and no one was there. Jungkook exhaled, his breath fogging in the cold air. He wasn't safe yet, but he had bought himself some time. Now, he needed to find Ji Sung-min. The last witness. The address in the notebook led him to an old apartment complex in Gangnam. The kind that had seen better days, rusted balcony railings, a flickering hallway light. Jungkook climbed the stairs, his heartbeat steady but heavy. Apartment 503, he knocked. Nothing. He knocked again, harder this time. Then, a shuffle from inside. Jungkook's pulse jumped. Someone was in there. A moment later, the door creaked open, just enough for a pair of tired, bloodshot eyes to peek out. Jungkook didn't hesitate. Ji Sung-min, the man on the other side, froze. His face paled. Then, slam. The door shut. Jungkook cursed under his breath. He pounded against the wood. I know who you are. I know what happened to Yoon Ha-rin. Silence. Then, a single word muffled through the door. Leave. Jungkook's hands clenched into fists. They killed Mr. Choi. His voice wavered, but he pushed through. He died, trying to protect the truth. Are you going to let them get away with it? More silence. Jungkook almost gave up, almost turned away. Then, the door unlocked. It opened just wide enough for Ji Sung-min to step into the dim hallway. His face was gaunt, his body thinner than Jungkook remembered from old pictures. But his eyes held terror. You shouldn't have come here, Sung-min whispered. They already know. Jungkook's stomach twisted. Know what? Sung-min swallowed hard. His hands trembled as he grabbed Jungkook's wrist. That you next. Jungkook's breath caught in his throat. The dim hallway felt colder, the walls pressing in. Ji Sung-min's grip on his wrist was firm, his eyes wild with fear. Jungkook forced himself to stay calm. What do you mean? Sung-min glanced down the hallway, as if expecting someone to appear out of the shadows. Then, in a hoarse whisper, they don't kill right away. First, they make you disappear. Jungkook stiffened. The same way they erased Harin. The same way they erased Mr. Choi. Sungmin's voice trembled. They'll come for you next. Jungkook's jaw clenched. No, he wouldn't let that happen. Then help me, he said. Tell me what you know. Sungmin hesitated. Fear and desperation warred in his expression. Then, with a shaky breath, he pulled Jungkook inside his apartment. The truth that was never told the apartment was a mess. Papers scattered across the floor, curtains drawn tight, the air thick with stale cigarettes. It looked less like a home and more like a bunker. Sungmin locked the door behind them, then rushed to a bookshelf, yanking out a hidden file. He thrust it into Jungkook's hands. Harin gave this to me the night before she died, Sungmin whispered. She found something she wasn't supposed to. Jungkook flipped through the file, his eyes widening. Documents, financial records, emails, all pointing to one name, the Black Curtain. A secret organization embedded deep within the entertainment industry, controlling careers, manufacturing scandals, erasing people who got too close to the truth. Jungkook's hands trembled. This is proof. Sungmin nodded. She wanted to go public with it. But before she could, a sharp inhale. She was silenced. Jungkook felt a cold rage settle in his chest. This was it. The truth Harin had died for. The proof that could bring them down. And now, it was in his hands. The final move, a sudden knock at the door. Jungkook and Sungmin froze at a second knock. Harder this time. Sungmin paled. They're here. Jungkook's pulse spiked. No, not now. He grabbed the file, stuffing it into his jacket. If they got inside, they wouldn't leave witnesses. Sungmin grabbed his arm. There's a fire escape. Go. Now. Jungkook hesitated. What about you? Sungmin's eyes were already filled with resignation. I've been running for 5 years. It's time to end this. The knocking turned into pounding. Jungkook swallowed hard, his chest tight. He wanted to fight. He wanted to save Sungmin. But if he died here, the truth died with him. Find someone who can expose them, Sungmin whispered. Don't let Harin's death be for nothing. Jungkook's fists clenched. Then he nodded and ran a story that must be told. The cold night air bit at his skin as he climbed down the fire escape, the file pressed against his chest. Behind him, the apartment door burst open. Shouts, footsteps, chaos. But Jungkook didn't look back. He disappeared into the night. Because now, he had everything: the truth, the proof, the power to end it all. And the Black Curtain? They had no idea what was coming.